The premium mid-sized electric SUV class has just got even bigger with the arrival of the new BMW iX1, complete with a range of up to 270 miles from a 64.7 kilowatt-hour usable battery. Prices start from £53,000 and it has a 0 to 62 mile per hour time of 5.6 seconds. But how does it stack up against its nemesis, the Volvo XC40?
The Volvo XC40 has been around for a few years now, and it is one of the more popular cars in the premium electric SUV class, and it's not hard to see why given how good it looks. Now, if you buy the Volvo right now, you're going to pay about £52,000. You get a 75 kilowatt-hour usable battery, which is good for a range of up to 270 miles, so very close to the BMW, provided you're looking at the dual motor model. You can get this with a single motor, but the dual motor that we have here is much closer to the iX1 xDrive 30, which is the only variant that you can get currently in the BMW iX1 range. So for that, you're looking at, on the Volvo, 402 brake horsepower, a 0 to 62 time of 4.9 seconds. It is fast, this thing. But the more important thing that you need to know right now is that if you order an XC40, you are going to get the model year 2023, which has some significant updates, chiefly a larger 79 kilowatt-hour usable battery, as well as different cooling system, different electric motors, all of which adds up to a potential range of up to 334 miles by WLTP standards, a not insubstantial difference to the 270 miles that you get in the BMW iX1.
No kidding. But even if Volvo seems to have just trumped BMW with the new improved range of its XC40, there is a lot to like in the iX1. The 490-litre boot is a good size for a start, with underfloor cable storage and rear seats that split into 3 parts to leave a flat extended load bay. Rear passenger space is really good in the iX1. It's actually slightly better, I think, than in the XC40. So this is sort of me sitting behind myself in this car, and I've got loads of leg room, plenty of headroom despite the optional sunroof that we've got in this car, so it's all very nice and light. Obviously you can get 3 people across this rear bench, but BMW has got one of the seat butts that comes down out of the roof, so if you do have a third person, that's going to obstruct your rear visibility, which is already not great, it has to be said. Still, really comfy. The floor's a bit high, but that's the case for both of these cars. You get your cup holders, and you've also got 2 charging ports down there. The dash in the iX1 is one of its real standout features. The materials feel super classy, the curved touchscreen is standard across the range and would feel at home in a car of twice the price, and the whole thing is really about the best interior in the class. So you do get most of the equipment that I think you'll want on the BMW, even if you go for the cheaper X-Line trim that we've got here. And that is the most affordable of the 2 trims on offer in the iX1. And you get adaptive cruise control, you get your leather, heated seats, that's all included. But I think most people are going to want to add the comfort pack, because that brings electric seats, lumbar adjustment and a few other bits that you're really going to want, and that's £1,000. Plus, I think most people are going to want to add the technology pack. That brings a head-up display, adaptive LED lights and keyless entry. Imagine having to pay £2,750 for the technology pack on a car that costs £52,000 anyway. And that would be particularly shocking for BMW were it not pretty much the case with Volvo as well, but we'll talk more about that in a second. Anyway, I think if you just go for the comfort pack on the X-Line in the iX1, then you're not getting a bad equipment list for the price in the standards of this class anyway. And if you go for the optional sunroof that most people are going to want as well, you're looking at basically £58,000 for this car, which is, by the way, exactly what this test car costs. The touchscreen system is very good too, with wireless CarPlay and Android Auto, inbuilt nav with charger search function, over-the-air updates and all of the features that you expect. I'd rate these as the best graphics in the class too, but it is a shame that the screen can be slow to respond and some of the menus aren't that logical. Now, the Volvo's boot is a bit smaller than the iX1's at 419 litres, but you do get some underfloor storage. There's enough for a couple of cables down there, and if you go for the mid-spec car at least, then you also get some quite funky kind of, load space, useful boot tricks that Volvo is quite well known for. I do think it's a slightly higher load lip than the iX1, so if you've got dogs and things, that's something to consider. Yes, it's a bit smaller than the BMWs, but you're still going to get, a chunky buggy or a big dog in there. And the Volvo has got a frunk, or some storage space in the nose of the car, which is great for additional cable storage if you need it. There's plenty of rear seat space back here too, if not quite as much headroom as you get in the iX1. I'm a real fan of Volvo's interior design. I think if I was going to get a car manufacturer to design my living room, I'd choose Volvo. I just really like that Scandi design feel, and I think the XC40 is a good example of it. Although I have to say this particular spec of car is quite dark, whereas I quite like the sort of lighter interiors in Volvos, but I do really like the finish on this trim. It's all a bit different. It all just feels nice and classy. However, I will say that the BMW really does feel
quite a lot classier in terms of its perceived quality, the material finish. There's some plastics around here that are starting to feel a bit cheaper, this kind of thing. I think to an extent the Volvo is starting to feel a little bit its age. Despite the fact that I would hardly say the BMW is very generously equipped, I think it's also still better on equipment than the Volvo, because if you go for the base core trim on the XC40, you don't get adaptive cruise control, which is mad, isn't it, on a Volvo, a heat pump or a reversing camera, all of which are included on the standard BMW iX1.
Most people will go for the mid-range Plus model as it brings adaptive cruise control and Volvo's semi-autonomous drive system, not to mention keyless entry, electric front seat adjustment and more. Guess what? That takes the XC40 dual motor up to £58,000.
Now, the screen in the Volvo, to be honest, it's not a patch on the BMWs in terms of the sheer sort of appearance of the screen, and I would say probably really in terms of the screen response times and this kind of thing too. The graphics are fine and you've got all the equipment you want. And the Volvo has got the huge advantage that this has got Google built in. It's all integrated with the car's systems. So you get Google Maps on the screen, and also you can do things like, hey Google, set destination for Leeds town centre.
Navigating to Leeds.
Good. So I have to say this is definitely one of the best voice control systems that I've experienced. And also what's lovely is that the car will give you a really accurate estimation of how much battery you've got left when you arrive at your destination, and I've genuinely found it really, really good. It's pretty much spot on. And also if you put in a really long journey like this, so I've put Leeds in, it's 245 miles away, and then it just comes up with a little thing on here that says you're going to need to charge, add charging stop, and then it comes up with all the different options on the route. It's just a really easy interface to use. It gives you all the information you need, and I think in terms of an integrated software system for giving you charging options actually within the car's inbuilt system, I think this is the best out there.
The BMW iX1 loses the charging race as its peak 130 kilowatt rate is not a patch on the 200 kilowatt maximum charging rate that the updated XC40 will offer. Since the BMW's battery is a bit smaller, both of these will still charge from 10 to 80% in 30 minutes. Plug into a 7 kilowatt home charger and you'll have a full battery in under 10 hours in the BMW and under 12 hours in the Volvo.
So I thought we'd start with the BMW iX1 because that is the new car here. It's really smooth and sophisticated. This car is on 19-inch wheels, and in terms of the ride comfort, I do think that it could be a little bit better. It's mostly kind of high frequency stuff around town, so it just picks up those kind of sharp edged potholes and also sort of coarser surfaces where it's really scruffy and patched up. It picks that up a little bit. Actual damper control over undulations is pretty good. It's not only really fast, so 308 brake, 5.7 to 62, like I've said, so it's really fast if you want it to be. It's not the sports SUV that you might be hoping it is, given the reputation that the X3 and the X5 has built up for BMW. I don't think that the X1 is really on that level. Yeah, you can enjoy a decent road. You can stick it into sport. You've got your drive modes down here, change your settings up, heavier steering and all of that, and you get quite a nice sort of tight, neat turn into a corner. You can really lean on it. It's got masses of grip. I've said this before, but I don't understand why BMW insists on kind of really fat steering wheels in so many of its cars. And I also really like the fact there's no haptic buttons on the steering wheel. That's all nice and straightforward. The throttle response is nice. You can put it into a heavier brake regen mode via this gearbox here. So you just literally snick it down into B mode, and that brings a much heavier brake regen. But it's fairly one-dimensional for brake regen. Rivals from Hyundai and Kia, well, they've got much better variable brake regen that you can control via paddles on the steering wheel, which I think is the better option. But nonetheless, you can have that in B mode, which is almost one pedal mode for around town. And then you can just have it in standard D, and that's really mild brake regen, which it does sense things in the head of the car, and so it's an adaptive system. It can feel a bit odd if you've never experienced it before, but it's generally quite easy to get used to. And most people who spend a lot of time in EVs actually sort of find that they use it all the time. I think the thing with the iX1 is that it just doesn't feel much different to a lot of the other stuff out there in this class now. It's such a busy class. You've got the Q4 e-tron, Mercedes EQA, Lexus is in this class now. Everybody's got a car in this class. And yes, electric cars by their very nature tend to be a bit more similar to drive, but I do kind of expect a bit more of BMW. The i4 is fabulous, it's really fun to drive, and I just think the iX1 is missing that edge of a bit more fun. I think one of the ways that BMW is trying to add a bit of character to the iX1 is with this system. It's the latest operating system 8, and that comes with various of these very fancy modes where you can change the graphics on the screens for art, and you can also change the soundtrack. You can go for expressive mode, and then you get kind of weird little, very distant trumpets. If you want to, you can also go for, in this iX1, we've got a digital art option, so you just get really kind of fancy art up here on the digital cluster as well as actually on the screen here. In terms of the way it drives, I think the BMW iX1 is absolutely fine, if not actually really very nice. But I do think it misses the mark a little bit in terms of being perhaps the sportier car that people might be hoping for in this class.
BMW iX1 managed 3.1 miles per kilowatt hour over our time with it, which is not bad for such a powerful and fairly heavy SUV. That means a range of 200 miles in fairly varied conditions and mild 15-degree temperatures. We'd expect a worst-case winter range scenario of around 160 to 180 miles, or a best-case summer range of about 250 miles.
So, the Volvo XC40, now this is available with a single motor and a dual motor version. This thing, 0 to 62 in 4.9 seconds, it is really, really fast. It's got a massive punch of acceleration that, to be honest, you don't really expect from a family SUV that in every other aspect feels like it's set up to be comfortable, refined and just a bit chilled. And then you just get this ridiculous acceleration. But we live in a Tesla era, and I think they've got something to answer for in that all manufacturers now seem to think that we should prove that electric motors can very easily hand out masses of horsepower, hundreds and hundreds of horsepower, and therefore everything now needs to do 0 to 62 in about 2 seconds or something insane. It's really unnecessary, and I personally like the single motor options in this class for being a bit longer range, a bit more efficient. Those are the priorities I think most people actually in the long run will have and should have. But it's got masses of grip. I really like the steering in the Volvo. I like the steering wheel as well, much slimmer than in the BMW. And there's a sort of really nice kind of oily progression of weight to the Volvo steering as you go into a corner. It's really nicely balanced. Body control's good too. Everything about this car just feels quite organic actually, and I like that. It's not a terribly fun sports SUV, so actually neither of these are. But I think on a good road, both of them are satisfying. And I think actually probably the Volvo is, if anything, slightly better than the BMW, surprisingly. If you want to increase the brake regen in the Volvo, you have to go through the settings, and it's a right faff as well. So you have to go right the way down into this charge driving menu in here, and then you have to scroll down. It's just a bit crazy, really. I don't know why they wouldn't make it easier to access the, dynamic, adaptive stuff, including the one-pedal drive that you might want to change. Should all be much easier to access. Anyway, once you've found it in the menu, then you can change your steering weight and also your one pedal drive, and then it's a really heavy brake regen, so the car will come to a complete halt all by itself around town. You don't need to hit the brake pedal if you don't want to. Some people like that, some people don't. It all feels very nice. You feel nice and upright. There's a proper SUV feel to it. I think there's a bit more of a hatchback feel to the X1's driving position. I really like it. It's just a really smart, neat, sort of well thought out package, I think, the XC40.
Of course, we haven't got the updated Volvo with its more efficient powertrain and bigger battery here, but we still managed to get 3 miles per kilowatt hour, which is good for a range of 220 miles. Expect a worst case scenario of around about 180 to 190 miles, or in the summer that will creep up to around about 270 or more. It's really hard to pick one of these cars as the best because they both share many of the same strengths. But were it my money, well, the efficiency, the styling and the slightly better driving dynamics in the Volvo would certainly swing it in the XC40's favour. Head to CarGurus.co.uk for a whole host of fantastic used cars, including loads of electric options, and please do like the video, subscribe to the CarGurus UK YouTube channel and turn on your notifications so that you don't miss any of our videos.